So hello fellow Earthlings. This is Earthling 6455463728. And I wanted to give another mechanic horror story. So this one is about my brakes. I was trying to see if it was connected to another story that I had. Well, I guess I'll just go ahead and tell them. Take up the whole amount of time. So I was living with my sister at the time. Our schools were close together, and we had a problem with the brakes. Apparently, a part of the car was leaking brake fluid, and we would, for whatever reason, I was crazy, I guess. I kept thinking that some animal was following us around like really far distances and would keep urinating on our car wheels. I don't know why I thought that. Maybe I couldn't think of any other reason, but I would come outside and I would see there would be some liquid on the car wheel, and that was just the only thing that I thought. Here's some liquid on the wheel of the car, and the tire, sorry, and I guess tire and wheel. Anyway, this would happen even when ours was the only car in the parking lot. I would come out and see it and be like, oh, okay. And I guess we would also refill the the little container under the hood that you're supposed to keep at a certain level with brake fluid. And for whatever reason, I didn't connect the two until, I don't know what happened in the interim, but I guess one day I connected the two and I realized that something on the brakes needed repairing. So me and my sister's boyfriend, we took down the car. We tried to take whatever we saw that was leaking off of the car. Unfortunately, we didn't have the right tools, and as a result of that, we couldn't get the thing off. And but we had loosened it enough so that the car did not hold brake fluid in it. So, but at the same time, we had to go pick up my sister at her job. So here we have a car with no brake fluid in it, and we had to still go pick up my sister because I didn't know anything about how the buses were running in that area, and neither did she. And for whatever reason, we couldn't call her to tell her whatever it was. So I will kind of fast forward over that. Maybe I will come back and describe what happened in between me taking it to the mechanic. But at any rate, we got it to the mechanic at some point, and I told the mechanic, hey, there's this nut that I was trying to get off, and I think that that's the reason. It might have something to do with that's the reason why the brakes are bad. So dropped the car off. We didn't really have a lot of friends who had cars ourselves at the time, so it was kind of like, a big deal to ask somebody to pick us up, to go there and pick us up, and then come back and drop us off. So anyway, went there, dropped off the car, and I guess the mechanic would have called us and told us, hey, it's fine. Came back and got into the car, I turned it on, and reversed out to the parking space in order to drive off of the lot that the mechanic was in. And then I pressed the brakes and there was no brakes. And he just fixed it. I say in quotes. Well, the point was that, I guess he had replaced the brake lines, and that didn't do it. That did not fix it. And he hadn't tested it to see whether that was really the problem or not. So, yeah. So needless to say, I was really upset, and I went back into where he was, and I gave him a piece of my mind. I feel kind of bad about it because I think his friends were around. But basically, I'm like, listen, and I'm just paraphrasing in a nice way. You didn't fix the car. You charged us however much money for it, and I'm not gonna pay you to do your job. Please fix it. So of course, he was pretty embarrassed in front of his friends for something like that to happen, for me to act like that. And now that I think about it, I did have another issue with my brakes, but that was a completely separate issue because it was a different part that needed repairing. So, yeah. Anyway, apparently he had a helper there, and the nut that took so much effort and never came off for me, apparently it came off really easy because he had the right tool. And that was how I realized that, hey, probably, that I needed a good toolbox. And that, I needed a good toolbox in the car. I needed a good toolbox in the house because, I don't know where I'm going to break down. So I need a good toolbox in the car at all times. And I also needed to have, if my sister was alone in her car, she probably needed a good toolbox as well. So I spent a good amount of time with, I'm remembering that there was a different guy who was there. Because there was this one, that the mechanic I'm talking about in this instance was the one mechanic that I went to a number of times at the recommendation of a friend of the family. And he had another guy there with him who, it wasn't that difficult for him to remove the particular part that needed replacing. But, I think we talked with him a little while, and I think, basically from these experiences, I realized that the main person that I needed to trust in instances like this was myself. And like I said, I needed to have a good toolbox with me, whether it's in the car or in the house, separately, etc. And to make sure that, my family members had one as well. Since there's a little bit of time, I'll give you another instance of a mechanic horror story. Basically, there was another mechanic that I was going to. He was close to my school and where I lived. And one day I had to go to him because I needed my car to be, to pass an inspection. And it wasn't passing. So I needed to go to him to try and figure out what the problem was and get it repaired. So I think he must have tried this or that, a couple of simple things. And then at one point, he takes a small valve out of the engine, and he shakes the valve. Then he's like, shakes it closer to my ear. He says, "You hear that? That means that thing needs to be replaced." It was a little, like, slight rattling noise that you heard. It was a small valve that looked like a top. I think it's the PCV valve, you might call it. So he went and got a new valve, and he charged me for it. But he couldn't figure out anything else that he could check, and that might be the problem at the time. So that was that. I guess I just took the car, and I figured I would come back on another day for him to check the things that were not as easy to check. Now, by this time, I had the book for my car. All right? So since I had the book, I figured, hey, let me check this valve that this guy showed me was bad. I went to the book, I looked it up, and guess what the book said? The book said that in order to check the PCV valve, you take it and you shake it just like the guy did. If you hear a rattle, it means that the valve is good. Yeah, that's what it means. Because sediment or residue can build up around that thing that rattles and cause it to not be able to move freely, so you wouldn't hear anything. So if you shake the valve and you don't hear anything, that's when you replace the valve that this guy charged me like $15 to replace. So, yeah. Once I had the book, that was part of the reason that I realized when mechanics were ripping me off. I could check and see whether what they were saying was actually true. And I still went back to the guy I mean, even knowing what I knew, I still went back to that guy a couple of times. I don't know when that thing with the PCV valve happened, whether it was, you know, second time, third time, fourth time, whatever. But I still gave that guy my money. And I want to say it's just because I didn't know anybody else. And yeah, it burns me, but it helps me to remember that I can really only rely on myself when I remember stuff like that. And I remember the stuff that, you know, with the brakes, the guy did not even check his work to see if the brakes were fine after he did what he did. I mean, if it comes to be something else, you just call me and tell me, hey, it's gonna cost more because it wasn't that thing. But anyway, it's that's a mechanic horror story. So guys, you can wish me lucks, you can like or unlike, you can comment on why you do or you don't, you can subscribe and or share, and of course you can do nothing. Peace.